Hello, everyone. On behalf of Embarcadero Technologies, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Rick Morelan Wrestles with SQL Server 2012 Error Handling. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tara Montanez, and I am the GoToWebinar organizer for today's event. Joining me online is Rick Morelan. Rick Morelan has attained over 30 Microsoft certifications in applications, networking, databases, and .NET development, and has provided training for numerous organizations such as Northwest University, Volt Technical Education, and Microsoft. As the author of the SQL Joe to Pros book and video series, his focus is to deliver the most effective and relevant learning material. Rick has comprehensive real-world knowledge in the subjects to prepare his readers for real-world troubleshooting issues while backing it up with IT certification. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Rick.
All right, thank you, Tara, and thanks to everybody who is joining. I'm hoping to give you guys a fun and eye-opening experience about error handling and, more importantly, takeaways that you get to use right away. A little bit quick about me and this presentation. This is the Embarca webinar for November 14th. You can call it a brown bag lunch, or if you're on the East Coast, it might be getting closer to dinner, or a late snack. Anyway, my name is Rick Morelan. I am the author of most of the Joe's to Pros books, or at least the SQL Server ones. And some of my qualifications, very briefly, are 12 years working and consulting in SQL, 20 years of database programming, but my first few years were misguided, or I could say stepping into by using Access. Back in the early 90s, we thought Access was going to take over the world. And then Internet and enterprise networking obviously showed the light on where databases were going. Back in 1997, I decided to pass 2 to 3 certifications every year, and I've stuck with my goal. And doing the math, I'm right in the mid-range of that goal by having about 36 Microsoft certifications, which include the Dev, Admin, and BI series on every version of SQL since 7.0. And then Microsoft rewards you with extra acronyms if some of those tests overlap with some other premium directions they want you to go. All of those start with the letter M for some reason, and that's my basket of those. Enough about my accolades. I just want to show you how things work. And if you would like to follow me, you can do so on an easy-to-remember Twitter handle of Joe's to Pros or a Facebook of Joe's to Pros. Today's talk is going to come from Volume 4 of my 5-volume series, the Programming Book. I have a beginning book, an advanced queries book for Volume 2, an architecture and performance for Volume 3. Volume 4 is programming. Volume 5, by the way, is interoperability with C#, XML, and PowerShell. So those of you who have the kit can just, refer to Chapter 9 and 10 of that book, and that's where it's coming from. But as a gift to some lucky person on this phone is we're going to give away, this is just released a couple weeks ago, brand new, fresh on the market is a SQL 2012 Functions Joe's to Pros book that I co-authored with Pino Cave. Stay on the line at the end, and Tara will announce who the lucky winner of that book is. It'll just be shipped to you. Okay, well, now that brings us to, before I get into SQL error actions, that brings us to our first poll question. I'm curious how many of those of you that are joining us right now joined me a month ago for my SQL basic performance talk. So Tara, go ahead and pull up the poll question before we get started with the new topics.
Great. So everyone should see this up on the screen now. The question is, did you attend the October 17th webinar from Rick Morelan on SQL performance? Just please vote yes or no. And I'll give you another 10 seconds or so to vote. Great, closing that out and sharing. So 74% of the folks have not had the opportunity to see that webinar. 26% did.
All right, so we're reaching new people, and welcome back those of you who attended the October version of it. I hope you find this one as or more enlightening. We are going to, so if you go back to me, do I have to do anything so the poll results change into my screen? Okay.
We're back to you.
All right. A couple of definitions and maybe some prerequisites about SQL error handling. Because if you think about it, we know there's going to be errors. So error handling isn't creating errors. It's saying, how do you want to react once the error comes up? Do you want to panic and have everything blow up, or do you want just something to be logged, an email to be sent? And there's all kinds of ways you can react to an error message. Now, SQL has some default ways that it reacts to an error message, and there are more ways than most people realize. So let's put ourselves in a very quick situation here where a client is going to call on a stored procedure that sits on a SQL server, and we'll call this user stored procedure A. Now, user stored procedure A has two things to do. It's going to call user stored procedure B and user stored procedure C. Inside of user stored procedure B is three statements. Any one of those statements could fail. And inside of user stored procedure C, it also has three of its own statements, and any one of those could fail. For the way to make all the error actions make sense, let's not choose the first statement or the last statement. Let's choose a statement in the middle. So we want to presuppose that statement number 2 of user stored procedure B is the one that's going to fail. If that fails, and what I mean by fails, it's going to encounter an error, SQL error severity of 11 or higher. If that happens, is it possible that statement 1 will have already run, statement 2 fails, and SQL goes, yeah, no big deal, let's go on to statement 3. And then user stored procedure B thinks, wow, I did a great job. Let's call on C and finish up all the other statements. I don't like this philosophy. Most people don't either, and it's a good thing SQL doesn't do this very often. But there's times where it does, and it'll even do it inside of an explicit transaction. So I want to make everybody aware of a reaction that's uncommon but happens called statement termination. Statement termination means even when it hits the error, it's going to run everything else, and it's going to commit everything else, which can be a bad thing if statement 3 is using logic from statement 2. Statement 3's logic would be bad. So let's go into another type of reaction SQL can have to statement 2 of user stored procedure B failing, and that is kill all of stored procedure B. Stored procedure B is no good. It's considered interconnected, and the logic's intertwined, so statement 1, 2, and 3 should not run at all. But if you look here, it's possible that user stored procedure B is going to say, wow, B didn't work, but let's at least call C. Another semi-undesirable effect. This reaction is known as scope abortion. It just failed the scope. It didn't fail the whole batch. 99% of the time, SQL is going to do what people think it always does, and that is the failure of B means that A should fail and not call C. It shouldn't go on any further than that. This is the most common. This is called batch abortion. And when you're talking about SQL error severities between 11 and 16, that's the only 3 reactions SQL has. There is a 4th reaction when you have a very high severity error message like 17 or higher, where the connection between the client and the server is going to be severed. If you ever want to simulate a error 17, an easy way to do that is to start a database backup. Back up your database to a thumb drive, and halfway through the backup, yank the thumb drive out, and that would be an error severity of 17. And when that happens, the whole SPID of the client connection will actually sever. And also, all of the process that we're running will not run. This is known as connection termination. We're not going to explore connection termination. We're going to explore the other 3 that have the user runtime errors, not the hardware failure errors. Okay, before we go into the next point, I would like to do the second poll question. This is one, seeing if everybody knew those terms. So, Tara, I'll give it over to you for a minute.